Whether you like it or you don't, whether you believe it's true or you don't, it will not change the fact that the minibus taxi is the people's mode of public transport. Think about it. Internalize it. My name is Isaac. This is another episode of Transit Ringas, where we're going to talk about commuter subsidy, something that government has gotten away with for the longest time, something that this democratic government, the battle that this democratic government has lost. The battle that, in fact, a concept that the democratic government took from the apartheid government and just continued with it. Continued with it the same way, and all they tried to do was to introduce a little bit of a triple B in it to say that those that are getting subsidy from government, make sure that you get some black people to own. And this really spoke about the buses in the main, that the likes of the PATCO and long-standing operations, at some point they were supposed to cut their businesses and give support to black-owned companies or operators, but the model stayed the same. So I want us to talk about subsidy. But also talk a little bit about our observations out of the Madlanga Commission. And I want you to understand, so this platform, we're not necessarily analyzing like others. We're not analyzing the Madlanga Commission, the ad hoc committee, as it were, like other platforms that I also, watch. What we're doing here is that what do we do? How do we relate that information that comes out of these platforms? How do we bring it into the public transport space? Because we have narrowed our space. We are people, or transit ringers will only focus on road transportation and a bit of rail. So our space is very confined to transportation, as it were. So I want us to talk a little bit about subsidy as a starting point, and then we would go towards the Madlanga and the ad hoc committee towards the end. Did you know that a government is paying for trips that are not taken? Did you know that the subsidy in this country works per kilometer, not based on the people that are actually on the bus? So when the bus operator says that I have traveled 6,000 kilometers and you pay me 32 rand per kilometer, that one, all you need to prove is the number of kilometers. As to whether the bus had nobody inside or had 5 people inside, as long as the kilometers were achieved and you've traveled those kilometers and you can prove that you traveled those kilometers, what happens is that government owes you and gives you the money. Now, this puts us into a very... So I'm going to share with you some serious numbers today, because ultimately we're going to have to look at is there logic on how the Department of Transport is doing things in this country? Or the Department of Transport has just imported the apartheid system and just deployed it and hope that it would work. But I want us to look at real numbers. I read a very interesting story recently on the Sunday Times that says that government has spent about 40 billion rand on the bus rapid transit system, the BRT. What is the BRT? The BRT would be the Rea Vaya system. It would be Arieng, I think in Ekurhuleni and the others. So you have your major cities. I'm talking Mangaung, eThekwini, Cape Town, my city, Tshwane, Ekurhuleni, Polokwane, and I think PE. All of this they have what you call a rapid bus rapid system, transport system, and it is a government funded type of a system. It is funded to ensure that at least there is reliable transportation to decrease the number of people that are using their private vehicles and trying to bring them in here. But today I want us to sort of analyze whether government has succeeded in spending the 40 billion rand for the bus rapid transport system. And maybe I should say right at the beginning that what a waste of money. What a waste of money. I'm going to say this, I'm saying it as a statement of fact, because when we compare what is happening practically and what government was hoping and wishing for, we realize that there's a big gap between what the dream was and what the reality today is. Would you believe me if I told you that all the buses in Cape Town, in Tshwane, in Mangaung, in Ekurhuleni, everywhere else, the BRT system, all of them combined are not transporting 100,000 people a day? 100,000 a day. Now, how do you like that? How do you like the fact that there are buses that are paid for, infrastructure built, special lanes created, stations and facilities created for over R1 billion, and we're getting nothing out of that? All of that is not able to transport 100,000 people a day. But Isaac, why do you say that is a failure? It is a failure because the BRT is the only government owned, because they are owned by municipalities, partly, and in some cases also owned by some of the operators. So it is supposed to be public transport system. So because in South Africa, we often use public transport system as if the South African commuter is moved by a public transport. In actual fact, we don't have public transport in South Africa. We use this term very loosely, because the universal definition of public transport would always be where government puts in money and subsidize the commuter trip or the operator, whichever model that they would use. But where government aids or helps the movement of people, especially the economically active people or the studying or student community. So the public transport system, if you look at developed economies, it will always mean where government provides transportation and it supports that by money. So in South Africa, we only have the BRT. We also have in Gauteng, we have the Gautrain, but we have PRASA. So PRASA is owned by government. It is a mess. Now, if we were to look at the amount of money that all of these subsidized institutions spend, you would realize that all of them combined, the BRT, Gautrain, PRASA, all of them combined don't touch the numbers that are moved by the taxi industry. That's why the taxi industry alone moves more than 70% of the commuting public every day. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does it mean when out of the 15 million or 20 million commuting public in the country, let's say 20, and I mean, for God's sake, 15 million will be transported by the taxi industry. And the taxi industry that is private is owned by individuals. It's owned by informal traders. In some cases they are formal businesses, but it's owned by individuals that have made or saw a gap and gotten into that space. So, but I want to give you some shocking numbers. Year 2020, 2024 to 2025, the BRT system throughout the country has only, for the whole year, has done 40 million trips. So you're talking 40 million trips. You will think that that's a lot. We can have 40 billion rand that is spent to only move 44 million, or to at least give us in actual trips about 44 million. For the whole year, 44 million for the whole year. The daily trips of the taxi industry daily, it gives you 30 million trips per day in South Africa. The BRT that has been funded and subsidized for 40 billion plus gives us 44 million trips per year. The taxi industry gives you 30 million trips per day. So what's the difference? It means that the taxi industry gives you 10.9 billion trips per annum and not 44 million. These are actual, these are, I'm not pulling this out of my head. 10 billion, 44 or 40 million trips for the BRT system throughout the country in your major cities. 40 billion subsidy for 44 million trips. 10.9 billion trips per year for zero subsidy. Remember when I started, I said, whether you like it or you don't, the taxi industry is the mother of transportation in South Africa. You can go and argue with your grandmother. The taxi industry is the mother of transportation in South Africa. Will it then make sense? And the reason why, by the way, before I go to the sense and logic, the reason why people will always go to the taxi industry with all its faults, because all the time when we talk about the taxi industry, we always talk about the bad things about it. But the truth is that the taxi industry is making the economy work. Whether you are angry with them, you hope they could die today, you hope they could be obliterated, it doesn't matter how you feel about it. As matters stand today, the taxi industry is responsible for keeping South Africa alive economically. Period. There are people who don't even have an option of a BRT, a bus or a train where they stay, and the only thing that they have access to is a taxi. So how you feel about it today does not change the fact that the taxi industry is responsible for moving South Africa to work. Isaac, what are you saying? Are you trying to come here and justify the taxi industry? I'm trying to say to you, We don't have an option as a country but to make sure that the taxi industry functions and functions properly. It respects the customer rights or the passengers, but you can't remove the taxi industry from. You can get all your Ubers. Uber is transporting about, I think, 6 million or so. It only does about 6 million trips or so a month or so, if I'm not wrong. The numbers could be wrong. So it doesn't matter how we feel about it. I'm trying to help you so that at least you help yourself, that you don't abuse yourself any longer, because we gotta have to work with the taxi industry and make it work for us. I'll come to other issues. So I'm saying with almost 11 billion trips, 11 billion trips per annum, the taxi industry gets zero, nada, nothing. PRASA gets about 13 billion rand per year. Gautrain, 1.8 billion per year. Golden Arrow, just as an example, gets about 1.2 billion per year. Subsidy, these are subsidies. BRT per year, still counting, 4.5 billion. Guys, what are we doing? What are we doing? All of these monies are given, these billions are given to the buses that are owned by specific private companies. 13 billion to PRASA, that's rail. It lacks signaling. They need 50 billion random just to get the signaling and the infrastructure right. Otherwise, they're going to do the COMSIS, bring us this lane and lane. But they need a lot of money for that to work. Even with all of this money combined, all of them combined are not able to compete with the taxi industry. Remember, the taxi industry gets nothing. So in actual fact, what does all of this mean? It means a passenger or a trip, a passenger per trip for BRT, a passenger gets about 100 rand, 102 rand per trip. If you take the money that is subsidized and you break it by the number of people that are using the system, you realize that government is aiding the people that are using the BRT system with 100 rand or 102 rand per trip. Remember, the taxi commuter, you and I, get zero. Is this fair? Does this make sense to you? And I will argue that I think we have wasted a lot of money with a system that's not efficient, that's not working, because majority of the South Africans are dependent on the taxi industry. What am I saying? Am I saying that we must get rid of the others? No, that's not what I'm saying. I am saying that this government needs to be fair, because a public transport commuter must be viewed as a commuter throughout. You can't cut them into pieces that this is a Gautrain commuter, that's a BRT commuter, and these ones we're going to give them money or support them. But all of these others, because majority of them are black, they get zero. This is the government that we call our own. And I told you, I said, for all, I'm using Patco as an example. Okay, I'll also use Golden Arrow. From Camps Bay to CBD Cape Town, let's say is 23 kilometers. For every kilometer government pays, and Golden Arrow takes an invoice to the Department of Transport for it to be paid. It doesn't matter whether there are people in that bus or not. Remember, they are scheduled buses. So scheduling means that there must be a bus, so they will say peak hour, there must be a bus or a train every 30 minutes. Off peak, there must be a bus or a train every hour, right? Whether there are people at the station at that time, Golden Arrow or PRASA will go and claim. I'm saying Metro Rails will go and claim. But the taxi industry gets nothing. I am deliberate about trying to show you that this government is not fair. So usage of money is not. That's why the bus companies are milking the system. That's why this government only we are struggling to get 1 million scholars given subsidy to go to school. There are less than 1 million kids that are getting government subsidy for scholar transport. Guys, are our priorities right as a country? So I am worried about how our spending patterns as a country. So I wanted to paint a picture that says that, do we allow, as commuters, this status quo continue? Or is it the time that we must have the discussions? Because government has had these discussions for the longest time. But these discussions about subsidy is always a discussion that is championed and led by government and the operators, less about us as the users of transport. The unfairness is felt by you and I because I am taking my 20 rand every day to jump into a taxi. That is not, the owner asks me for a 20 rand and I pay it. If I don't have it, I don't jump in. And if a taxi operator moves from Sandton into Johannesburg CBD with no people, it's his loss. But to hamba diff, it's a dead mile. It's your problem. What am I trying to say? And I want you to hear me properly. I am saying that the time has arrived where we need to create a voice where permanent public transport users, especially the taxi users or passengers, come together and raise a voice and demand fairness and demand that we are subsidized. We are subsidized as individuals because we are South Africans. We are also black. We also stay in the townships. We also, all these other benefits that are gotten by, are received by by the PRASA passengers and the BRT. All of us qualify because we have the same characteristics. Why are we not subsidized? When all of us are going to Sandton to go and make it work, why are we not subsidized? Why have we allowed these people in offices and ties to read? Ibe bona ba buang ka subsidy in our absence. Why is that? We have taken a back seat and we are being taken advantage of. So I want to call on you and just say, $11 billion. I said 10.9. I'm rounding it to 11 billion trips per annum. 30 million trips. 15 million passengers every day, depending on the taxi industry, deserve a subsidy. And that same taxi industry supports more than 600,000 jobs as independent businesses. And yes, Maybe let me come to that reality that you and I speak about every day. Basile, abahloniphi, all of the. But would it be the case? Yeah, no, Isaac, these ones will never change. Somebody said, the taxi industry will never change. I think they will. In fact, they realize now that the way they've been doing business over the last couple of years is not going to continue. They're going to be arrested if the drivers do not have the necessary permits. If the vehicles are unroadworthy, they are going to be impounded and removed from the road. They are aware that reality is happening today. So if you're not aware, in Gauteng, in Cape Town, in KZN, that process has started, removing the unroadworthy vehicles and drivers that don't have licenses. But while government is trying to correct that part, it's time that we put pressure on government to say that now you need to subsidize, because this guy, if you remove the number of vehicles on the road, it means that there's going to be running a taxi business will be healthy. But it means that the person who has just bought a new Quantum will now be able to reliably be able rather to pay for their monthly installments, be able to maintain the vehicle and all the other things. It is possible, it can be done. But you and I must be subsidized. What am I saying when I'm saying that you and I must be subsidized? What difference do you think it would make where you could get a 500 Rand or 1,000 Rand on your transportation every month? You're paying 20 Rand. There are people who are spending on average 40% of their monthly income in transport. What if it was 15%? What if it was 20%? You cut it by half because government can meet you halfway with subsidizing. What difference will it make in your life today? If you're spending 1,000 Rand, what difference will a 500 make? If you're spending a 2,000 Rand, what difference would a 1,000 Rand make in your life today? I know it would make a difference in mine. I don't know about you, but I know for a fact that it would make a huge difference in the lives of many other South Africans. But government will not be able to implement, and one of the reasons why government, as I conclude on this subject, one of the reasons why government has not been able to implement a subsidy system in the taxi industry or the minibus taxi industry is because the industry is informal. These guys don't want to formalize their businesses. So we now can track who is the person in your taxi, because from now moving forward, the passenger must be the one who's going to be subsidized. But for government to subsidize the passenger, government needs to know who the passenger is. There is no other way. In the taxi industry, if you are going to subsidize kilometers and not people, they will finish that subsidy in one day, because they will just drive back and forth, and then bring a 20,000 claim today. So the government will have to know who is the person who's using the taxi and where are they going and how often are they going there, so that we can link every subsidy per person. So it means that even the people that are using the public transport system and the taxi industry in particular will have to be visible. We need to know who they are. And I'm not talking casual people. I'm not taking casual travelers and somebody who just wakes up and goes to Josie once in a while. I'm talking people that are using the system every day. We need to know who you are, where you come from, and what you're doing. Whether you're going to school, whether you're going to your own business or you're going to work, we need to know who those people are so that we can make and create a voice for the people that needs this kind of subsidy. And I'm inviting you to please subscribe on all our social media platforms. Follow Transit Ringas, subscribe on our YouTube and the rest of the others, because we are building a community that will create a voice. And this voice, it's a voice that would challenge government, and we must challenge government because this is a constitutional right. Did you know? The reason why public transport is regulated is because government has got a constitutional obligation to give us a reasonable, a sound transport, and. But a public transport system is recognized in the Constitution of the Republic. But of course, the taxi industry comes with a number of challenges. I've already spoken about the informality. I've spoken about crime. Kugcwele abotsotsi. Not the entire industry, but there are criminals who are now using the taxi industry to launder or clean their money. There are cash heist operators that are now in the industry. There are government officials. There are police officers and traffic officers that are now owning vehicles in the minibus taxi industry, that are now using government and the privilege of the information that they have. They're now using it to defeat the ends of justice or the ends of the law. What does that mean? It means we now have, we had a story in the Val. One of the operators, who's a police officer or a traffic officer, tells the taxi operators that you can't use that street because there's going to be an operation there and they're targeting taxi. That's defeating. You are hiding the people that are supposed to be arrested for different crimes and mistakes that they commit on the road. You are hiding them from the law. And you are using privileged information to share that. That's how they can send information in the group, say that don't use that particular street. Hey, Bafet, when you move from Santin into CBD, Oxford has got traffic officers. Don't use that. You don't no. This is why we have this kind of a situation that is. And this is what the Madlanga Commission shows us. The Madlanga Commission is showing us that after General Mkonazi, it shows us that taxi violence and conflicts can be solved if government and the police are focused. It has been proven, when you listen to Bekikele, you realize that taxi violence had subsided in KZN when you had the Katomena task team. The cash heist in KZN, there was a point where all of them, there was none. Because the criminals knew that is an area or a province that is not tolerant to those type of things. The guys who are doing these things out of the KZN will move into other provinces because they knew that you will meet your maker if you were to do any of those crimes in KZN. But now things have fallen flat. So there are more weapons in the taxi industry than flowers. It is because it is allowed by the South African police. We know that we have the capability. Why are you not solving these problems? It's because it is not, the taxi violence is not a priority crime. You can all you want. If you did not use the same methodology that you're using for political killings to deal with the taxi violence in South Africa, then taxi violence is not a priority to you. You can't just get 10 police officers and you call them a special taxi violence unit when you just take in your ordinary police officers, put them in just to go and respond to. No. You need a multidisciplinary approach where you have forensic, where you have prosecution, where you have all of these must be exactly the same characteristics and how you've packaged the political killings task team. You need it for the taxi industry because the same guys that are used to kill politicians are the same guys that are used in the taxi industry. Abonunu phela are hired. Ununu is known with law. He's just specialized in unaliving people. Lo bayamazi ukuthi uyabulala. And siyabazi labantu la. Some of them are neighbors, some of them are friends, some of them. But there's no platform that enables us to address this issue. So the taxi industry has worked against itself. If you're listening to the Madlanga Commission now, there are names of taxi bosses that are dropped. So you can see that where there's a problem of guns and unaliving of people, you always find that there are people in the taxi industry that are participating in some of these crimes. And I must be the first one, and I've said it before and I'm going to repeat it again. I work very closely with the taxi industry. I now know. I had the same perception like you. I also thought that at some point that every taxi person is a criminal. I now know better. That there are decent men and women who wake up to just come and do, just to try and fend for their children and families. But yes, we also know that there are criminals who are hiding under this. And that's the reason why you're finding that the people that were in this industry for the longest time are using it to live. They are now being challenged. So I'm suggesting to you that things can be better. Things can be better. But don't work as an island. You can't be solo. You can't do things your own way. An opportunity is here that you join a community that speaks about that everything about public transport. You're going to find it here. You're not going to find it anywhere else. You're going to find it here. And if you're a user of public transport, you better be here, so that the updates in this community don't leave you behind. So I'm inviting you. Don't forget, you have that, all the information that you require about Transit Ringas, but most importantly, you need to have the Transit Ringas app. You can't go another day without the Transit Ringas app. It is for you and I to make a decision today. Do we want to allow this situation to continue, or is time that we demand our benefit? And our benefit is that we qualify for a subsidy as well. And we are going to soon dispatch it's not a memorandum, a petition, where public transport taxi users are going to demand that they must also be subsidized, so that at least we can get a voice, 20, 50,000 people, and we can have formal discussions on the basis of what you guys require from the Department of Transport. It's time that we must be subsidized. It's time that the industry be formalized. Government can't be asking questions. The industry needs to be formalized. And the formalization process is going to be led by the taxi industry. It was their resolution. The National Taxi Task Team resolved, and it was formed for that purpose because it came after the National Taxi Lekgotla. The Lekgotla resolved that there must be formalization of the industry. So we're going to hold you accountable on your own resolutions, because you must champion and lead the formalization process. My name is Isaac Lesole. This was your Transit Ringas episode. Until we meet in the next one again. For now, until then, peace.
Yo, en het rijmt.